The intro is correct. This is the Fenway Rundown. I'm Chris Cotillo, Sean McAdam here, both recording from our individual homes. This has happened like twice in the last 3 months, as our travel schedules have been busy. Chris Smith in Tampa covering the Red Sox and the Rays. And oh, what a start they got off to last night. We will refer to this as the Is the Sky Falling podcast, Sean. I think some fans are ready to give up on the season 18 games in. I don't think we're there yet, but as we sit here on April 15th, happy tax day to those at home, mostly my father, who's a CPA. I think that last night legitimately is one of the worst performances in Red Sox history, and there's a pretty good chance that Tanner Houck had the single worst start in Red Sox history. But other than that, everything's fine.
It was up there or down there, depending on your perspective. Certainly not a good way to start out that series. And coming on the heels of losing 2 out of 3 to a very bad Chicago team, including a loss that was arguably as bad as last night's, given the quality of the competition and the fact that the Red Sox made 5 errors in that game in Chicago last Friday compared to, what was it, 2 last night? Could have been more, I suppose. Certainly could have given Trevor Story an error in that big inning. Uh, Nothing to recommend about it. A quiet offense, a lousy start, and a sloppy job by the defense. And really, a little more than a tenth of the way through the season. Here are here is a list of people who are exempt from criticism: Trevor Story, Wilyer Abreu, Garrett Crochet, Aroldis Chapman, Justin Slayton.
His ERA is like 8, but
Yeah, but that was one,
yeah.
that's the
There's
classic.
I mean, Josh Winkowski has a good ERA.
Yes, we'll get to him in a bit. Uh, we're talking about 4 players who have performed well through the first 18 games. And that's about it. You go around the horn. Casas isn't hitting. Bregman's hitting some, but he's got 4 errors already, which I don't think anybody
Yeah, that's
expected.
the most surprising part of the first 2.5 weeks. Let's just say that.
Could be. Jaron Duran not generating offense at the top of the lineup, some sloppy play in the outfield. There's very little to recommend here, and that's why it's harder and harder to look at this and say that it's kind of fluky or small sample size when you've got upwards of 20 people underperforming on that roster. It's an issue.
Richard Fitz was good. You forgot him.
Yes, I did. My
Uh,
apologies, Richard.
the I tweeted this and people didn't like the take, and I talked about it on Friday and talked about it in the last couple times. You and I have gotten together for pods, which again has been rare because we've had guests and it's been scattered and so much travel. But like I I have a reputation as more pessimistic than optimistic, especially on the pod. I'll flip it and give you what I actually think on this team. I think that the offense is going to figure it out based on the fact that there is too much talent. Bregman's going to be better at the plate. Duran, we did talk about throughout the offseason a potential step back, but I think he's going to be better at the plate, the instant offense, all of that. I think Costas can only go up from here, right? So he's going to provide something. Campbell has shown that he can hold his own. Another guy that probably has exceeded expectations in the mix there. Willier has been good. Roman Anthony is going to come up eventually. I think this team is going to hit, and I think that's not going to be a problem. Is this a prolonged stretch of suck? Yes. I mean, the swing and miss is off the charts. The strikeouts are there. They're not putting the ball in play. They've homered, just 2 homers, I guess, in the last 8 games. It's been prolonged and it's been bad. We can get to more of that. The defense, I kind of think the same exact thing. There's too much talent for it to, you know, be the way it is. Not last night, but a lot of these games, the weather was freezing and tough to grip the ball, tough to field out there. So maybe give him a little bit of slack, not an excuse, just kind of the reality. Bregman has not been good at third, which I think is shocking, especially considering everything that went into it. Costas with a key error the other night. And one thing that drives up this error total, which is dumb and a stupid thing, they have like 5 catchers interferences.
Yep.
If they've not been good defensively, but the number looks a little worse because getting your
Well,
glove
right.
clipped.
It's not an indication of sloppy play, but as I wrote over the weekend, uh, you're still getting a free base,
Yeah,
right?
right,
I mean, it's not like a scoring decision where it
right.
reflects poorly on you individually. The batter is still taking first base when he shouldn't.
Yeah,
So while you can say that that's not in the same category of, throwing the ball wildly past second on a force play or bobbling a routine ground ball, the effect is the same.
yeah. And I mean, we've seen, Rafael made an error the other night, Winkowski on the mound. Like there's just been, sloppy plays. There's been a couple nights where they just have not showed up Friday and Monday for sure. But to me, and I said this the other day, I'll stick by it. The defense, I think, will figure it out. The offense has to figure it out, right? Again, too much talent on both of those in both of those situations. The starting pitching is the big red flag that nobody's really recognizing or talking about still. Crochet, I think, has that Chris Sale. Could he strike out 20 today? Could he throw a no hitter today? Potential every 5 days. We've seen that 2 out of 4 so far, especially Sunday, which we'll talk about. Beyond that, the alarm bells are off the charts for me. I mean, I just think it's a group that you needed some things to go right behind Crochet if you considered him a certainty, and I think everybody kind of did pretty much. But the rest of it, I mean, Houck, the warning signs were there in spring training. I know his outing before last night was good, but 3 out of 4 he's not been good. Bueller
Well,
is a huge start tonight. Go ahead.
I'm going to say about Houck, the warning signs were there in the second half last year.
Right, right.
If you look at the numbers after the All-Star break, he had an ERA over 5.
Hmm.
And, that was for whatever it worked out to be, probably 13, 14 starts in the second half. You can say it was trying to deal with a full season, trying to deal with 30 starts for the first time in his career, kind of hit the wall. Okay, but the results have been bad now for going on, let's say, 4 major league months. The last 3 of last year and, a good chunk of April here. That's enough to be disturbing.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at it's not just the ERA, it is the underlying stuff like the lack of swing and miss, the lack of strikeouts, the lack of, movement. Red Sox stats points the stuff out and synthesizes it more clearly than anybody, but I mean, he's been pointing that out for weeks and months now on how Bueller, like I said, I have a lot of question marks about him. Again, he was good in his last outing, but bad in the first couple. I think, you're asking a lot out of him. And beyond that, Fitz was a guy who was pitching probably the second best of anybody in the rotation. He's going to be out here for a little while. Newcomb, I don't think we had high expectations for him. Good FIP, bad ERA. The team hasn't played great behind him. To a degree, his performance, it is what it is.
Well, and he's also allowed a ton of base runners.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
but I mean, my point
at
is
a certain point, when you have that much traffic,
Yeah.
you're going to give up a bushel full of runs, as he has.
My point is when we're talking about the rotation, spending more than about 10 seconds on him, considering how he's probably not going to start the rest of the year, doesn't really matter.
Well, and that's the caveat here, right? That they began the year without 3 guys that they had projected to be in the rotation. And while we have no idea what's going to happen with Cutter Crawford, he doesn't look like he's going to be back anytime soon. But there are going to be returns probably on the homestand from Brian Bayo, and not long after that, Lucas Giolito.
Right.
Now, in theory, those should both be upgrades over whoever they're replacing, although, as you noted, Fitz had pitched exceedingly well, gotten them through 5 innings in every outing so far in the big leagues. Good for him. Actual quality depth in the rotation. How long he's going to be sidelined with this pectoral issue, we don't know. Doesn't seem to be anything structural with the shoulder, but he's going to miss time. But at least you're on the precipice of getting guys like Bayo and Giolito back, guys that you, when spring training began, had penciled in as part of that rotation. That should lift the starting issue at least a little bit.
Yeah, but to me, like, again, to say that we know, and I really like Lucas Giolito as a person. I think that was a good signing when they got him. To think we have any idea what he's going to bring after this layoff,
right?
I mean,
but
silly.
Let's put it this way: you need to win a game. You want Sean Newcomb on the mound or Lucas Giolito?
Right. I mean,
right. I mean,
but
even the unknown,
Richard Fitz or
even
Lucas
the
Giolito
layoff
right
going
now.
back to the end of 2023, you'd rather have you'd rather have Lucas Giolito in your rotation than Sean Newcomb. So I'm saying that while he's probably not going to be lights out right away, he should be an upgrade.
Yeah, and I think that, bigger picture, the people had high expectations for this guy anyway heading into the season. They need Bayo to have a really good year. I mean, if you're not going to get it out of Houck, if those alarm bells are going off, if Bueller's going to be inconsistent, and not saying that, 4 starts make a season here, but again, there's signs. You need Bayo to be really, really good. Um, they're penciling him for Patriots Day, which is this is a guy who has historically pitched horrible during the day. So why don't we pencil
Let's
him in for
start him the earliest game of the season.
yeah, if there's an 8 a.m. start, they're picking it for Bayo. But to me, it's just like you look at it and it's Crochet and the field. They need a number 2 to emerge. It doesn't look like it's going to be Houck. I have my strong doubts about Bueller. So they need it to be Bayo. And the Crawford thing, like he's been throwing bullpens without advancing to face live hitters for like 3 months now.
Yeah,
So,
and worse, this is an issue that goes back 13 months.
right.
He first experienced this knee trouble last April. They somehow got him to lead the team starts and innings pitched last year. And credit to him for being able to pitch through that discomfort and make the adjustments and be relatively successful. But this seems to me like it's headed for surgery at some point.
Yeah, he told me last week that it's not, and he feels better, and it's just a point of building up. But when these things take this long, you do kind of wonder.
Well, and as I said, it isn't something that just developed in spring training.
Right.
This is an issue he's been dealing with for better than a year. Why is there this trust and belief that it's going to go away with another couple of weeks or another month of rehab? I'm not feeling very bullish on that at all. And when I spoke to him in spring training, I said, has a surgical procedure been put on the table here at all? And he kind of shook his head and said, no, that would be a long recovery. I'm getting the sense that if it comes to that, he would miss the year. Yeah. You think of, well, you can repair knee issues sometimes and have guys back in a couple of months if it's not a torn ACL, and it isn't here. Mm-hmm. But it is some inflammation in the knee that has not gone away for better than a year, and it's prohibiting him, as you said, from even starting to throw live BPs and get on. And then once you get to that, you've got a month buildup. Right. With rehab starts and building up pitch count and strengthening
there's
the arm.
No way before June 1st here now.
Exactly.
So I think we now know why the Red Sox were willing to or wanting to enter the season with 6 capable starters plus. They probably knew that this was a potential issue. Obviously, the Bayo and Giolito issues more minor and unforeseen, but will be something to watch. And again, the pressure goes on, I think, especially Bayo as soon as he, makes that first start in the majors next week. He's a guy that has, I think, gotten off to slow starts. We've seen him kind of get hurt to start seasons now a couple times, but it's time for him to take that big jump. You're a year removed from the contract. They need another guy to step up. I think if you talked to anybody a year ago, you would have said you take Bayo over Houck in terms of upside any day. I think they need him to show that. I think he's a major X factor for this season, and we'll find out in a week. Looking around the diamond, there's been a lot of talk about Casas. There's been a lot of talk about, Rafaela's struggles, which we can get to. Duran, Chris Smith wrote about that for this morning for us. There's a lot of guys who are not hitting, who are striking out at a high rate. We've seen William move up to the 4 spot. Casas go to the 6. There's been a lot of talk about Roman Anthony coming up and saving the offense. I don't think they're too keen on doing that like this week or imminently. From an offensive perspective, Sean, what do you see here?
Yeah, again, it's hard to feel optimistic. I'm not saying that this is what we're going to be looking at for the entirety of the season, but these are not pockets or individual guys who aren't performing. Beyond Campbell and Abreu and Story, you can look at the other 6 spots in that lineup. Whoever's in the lineup. Pardon me?
Rafi's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about Rafi long term, but after that hot stretch at home, he's cooled off again, and has an OPS of around 600. That's not what you expect 3 weeks into the season from your top guy in the lineup. There's I'm not sure. The pitching problems you could almost see coming down the track with some of the injuries they were dealing with, some of the inconsistency we're seeing in the other guys. But I don't think anybody expected this team to struggle offensively. This was a top five offense last year, and you essentially subbed out Masataka Yoshida for Alex Bregman, right? That's the
Well,
big
O'Neill,
change, right? You've lost
O'Neill and
O'Neill,
Campbell, you know.
right? Um, I mean, both of those have the potential to be upgrades. I mean, it's hard to say that about somebody who's got 2.5 weeks in the big leagues versus someone who led the team in home runs last year. But we also know O'Neill, a ton of strikeouts, not available for good chunks of the season. The incredible thing was he hit 31 homers and played 2/3 of the schedule. Wasn't somebody to extend innings, move runners, all that. He was kind of all or nothing, and the 31 homers are valuable. This team hasn't been able to show power. They could use somebody like that, but in the long run, Campbell has the potential to be a better offensive performer than O'Neill, and already Bregman is a better opportunity, a better offensive option than is Yoshida. How then is this offense statistically and by eyesight as disappointing as it has been?
It's the strikeouts. I mean, if you look at it, Rafi has
Okay, but
20.
they were the strikeouts were, they were top three in strikeouts last year and managed to be top five in runs scored.
Yeah, well, I think
It can be done. I mean, the Dodgers are striking out a lot too, and they're 11-6.
right. I mean, it's just if you look at it, Rafi has 27, obviously a lot at the beginning. Duran already has 20. Story has 22. Bregman and Casas with 18. Casas,
And the Bregman thing is shocking in that way because
yeah,
that was part of his appeal, right?
right.
In addition to being the righty bat to balance out the lineup, the defensive upgrade at third, at least in theory, and we know that's going to come around. Uh, Part of his appeal was getting on base and making contact. He was not a guy that historically has struck out a lot, but he has been for the first 3 weeks.
And another thing that is just to me, if you look at some of these numbers, they're almost mind-boggling. Some of these guys, the bit guys, the guys that you could, maybe pencil in at the bottom of the lineup to help you out on a given day. David Hamilton is 1 for 21 with 7 strikeouts. Narvaez, after like going like 4 for 6 to start, is hitting 194 with a 553 OPS. Rafaela is hitting 220 with a 551 OPS. Ref Snyder has a 544 OPS. Sable's 1 for 6. Wong is 2 for 23. So the Red Sox have like 10 hits from the catching position the entire year from guys off the bench. They have 12 hits total. Romy Gonzalez has actually been
Oh,
good.
and not just that, but as you said, uh, there's a cliff after about the fifth or sixth spot in the order.
Yep.
They're getting nothing from the final 3 or 4 spots.
And so when you talk about runners in scoring position, when you talk about those opportunities, and that's half your lineup, they're getting absolutely nothing. There is obviously the talk, Sean, from 2 to 6 mostly, but all over the place about Driveline and the obsession. I think it's the most overblown storyline of definitely of the year, maybe of all time. We have no reason to, promote Driveline or, blow smoke here or talk about hitting philosophy. It's just a part of the game. Every team uses every tool. The Red Sox do have some of those people on their staff, yada, yada, yada. It's just it's I think less of a philosophy thing. You think Alex Bregman's going to come here after being a good big leaguer for a decade and go, oh, shit, I got to change things up right now, right? Like it's just, I think, an overblown thing.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for people to use the word nerd
right.
over and over again without having any understanding of the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same people who swear that the nerds and the computers told them to do this. Wake up! It's 2025, and every team in the game is guided by analytics. Every team in the game, not 5, not 10, not 20. Every team in the game, including the Dodgers, including the Yankees, who are known as two of the biggest analytics inclined organizations in the game, they've done okay. So to point to this and to suggest that it's the evil specter, the boogeyman of driveline that has somehow turned future batting champions into hacks at the plate through 2.5 weeks is a lazy take, and it's flat out wrong.
And then there's the question of Pete Fatsi. I think we've seen a lot of this. You know, I would, say that number one, 18 games, right? Like that is what it is. Number two, Alex Cora has never fired a coach in season. But I do
Well,
think that,
I mean, to be fair, that's not going to be Alex Cora's call.
right. Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
yeah.
he might have input into the composition of the coaching staff, but he can't fire a coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has more power than Breslow at the end of the day in the organization, but whatever. Like I don't see that happening imminently. Maybe another 2 weeks, there's a change, but you look at it, and this, kind of has been an underperforming group over the last few years offensively. So you start to wonder. I just find it hard to think that anything would happen in April.
Yeah, they do not strike me as people who are going to overreact to a tenth of the schedule. Um, if you're behaving that way, then you have deeper problems. Is what we're seeing concerning? Absolutely. But does it mean that you need a wholesale change in terms of instructors and coaches? No, I don't think so. And this has not been a panicky organization in recent history. I don't think that's going to change now.
Do you want to get to a bright spot before we wrap? I flew home from Chicago on Sunday night, and I very nearly witnessed the second no hitter of my life in person. Crochet was unbelievable. I think, it was it was very funny to me to see how he approached the whole weekend. Where, of course, any this is not a knock on the people who cover the White Sox or Chicago reporters at all, because anybody would approach this the same way. But just the nonstop questions during his Friday availability and post game Sunday. Did this one mean more? Were you jazzed up? And in a kind of a hilarious way, he was like, "No, not at all. I really don't care. Like, it's nice to be back, but like, you know, it was clear that he had like outgrown the White Sox, right? Like a horrendous team, and he had a career year, and he was ready to move on, and he
Well,
loves being with the Red Sox. And Friday afternoon, after we did this last pod, he did a scrum, and he had, it came off in the moment, I think, kind of more impactful than it did in print, where he was saying, "Yeah, I was in spring training and looking around, and Rafi's won a ring, and Bueller's won a ring, and Bregman and Chapman and these guys." I looked around, and I was like, "Oh, this is the big leagues." Like, really a hilarious quote, and I don't think
right.
it came off that way in print as much as it was where, he was kind of, not
Well,
necessarily a shot, but it was.
look at it from his perspective. He knew that from probably May of last year that he was pitching his final season with the White Sox.
Yeah.
He
If he
knew
got that
that,
far,
pardon me?
if he made it past the deadline.
Right. Well, but I mean, starting his final
Yeah.
season with the White Sox is what I'm suggesting. He knew that they were preparing to move him. In part, it's why they were so careful in managing his workload post Tommy John. The last thing they wanted was damaged goods. And then, you don't have that trade chip that could return you, as it did, four top prospects, two in the top five, getting Kyle Teal, who should be the catcher of your future in Chicago, getting Braden Montgomery, a potential 4 or 5 tool guy in the outfield once he's healthy and matures. I mean, there's a lot to like about what they gave up or what they got
Hmm.
for Crochet, but he could read the writing on the wall. He knew that he wasn't long term on the South Side. So I think mentally, it was like, why am I investing myself emotionally when I know I'm going to be gone in July or December, as was the case? And so to expect him to get all weepy about coming back to this place where he'd pitched for a little more than 2 years. I mean, when you think about the recovery from Tommy John, this is not even Chris Sale, who had some, year after year seasons with the White Sox where he got Cy
Got
Young
one
considered.
playoff run in 2020 as a rookie, the year he was in college in a COVID bubble.
Yeah, there was nothing to get sentimental about or nothing to build upon. He knew that he was a short-termer there, and it was only a matter of time before he got moved. So, again, to expect him to be all sentimental and gee whiz about going back to a team he didn't spend a lot of time with, and B, a team that was historically bad last year. Gee, I wonder why he's not all emotional and touchy-feely in his return.
Yeah, and I think Trevor Story put it best. Like he's always on 100 on games he starts, so we didn't notice any different. And look, credit to him. And you talked about the 5-6 overperformers at the beginning of this pod. Credit to him for the blockbuster trade, the $170 million contract, and coming out and just proving it basically in this first month. I know they're 2-2. I know opening day he was just okay, and against Toronto he was just okay in the cold, but two absolutely dominant starts where he put the team on his back and won games. They have 8 wins, and he
Three,
has two of them
they're
by himself, right?
yeah, they're 3-1, right?
Yeah, three and
They're
one. You're right. You're right.
three
On
and one. He
opening
won
day.
the opener.
Yeah.
Won the one in Baltimore, lost to Toronto, and then won the other day.
Yeah, my bad. I was the only one they wanted Texas. I got the wires crossed, but he's been phenomenal, and he has been, as advertised, and he's going to face the White Sox again this weekend. And like I said, we covered Sale. You covered him for, I guess, the first 2 years, and that I didn't, but I saw most of it. You saw all of it. Like it was could he get to 18, 19 strikeouts tonight? Could he throw a no hitter?
Yeah,
Could he try to do
it's
something?
appointment viewing. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not quite at the level of Pedro, because Pedro was so rare and his achievements and his best was so high that I'm not sure. Maybe Skeens, maybe somebody else comes along and pitches to that level, but it's certainly of the Chris Sale garden variety where you want to be in front of the TV or at the ballpark every time Garrett Crochet is pitching because you never know what you're going to see. The ceiling is very high for this guy, and he proved that on Sunday.
Yep, and he will be pitching again, I think either Friday or Saturday against his former team back at Fenway, which should luckily be warmer for those of us who have to be there. So, Red Sox have two more in Tampa. Chris Smith will have you covered there. We will have a very different looking podcast coming up Friday, Sean.
Yes, let's hold off on some details, but we will be coming to you from a remote location not far from Fenway Park. So check us out on Friday and see what we're talking about.